Doing this raw style. We're going live. Uh, I'm Damien from the Dudes of Horror. As promised, we're going to give y'all a tour of the horror movie collection. So it's a bit lengthy, there's occasional doubles. My wife and I combined our collections together, so might have an occasional triple in there, but it's okay. My wife and I spent quite a bit of time yesterday organizing these by alphabetical order. Wormboy assisted too. Uh, Took us about 2 hours, so kind of messed it up a little bit here. So I'll just start from the beginning all the way to the end. Um, Starting it off, we have 10 Cloverfield Lane. Very good movie. The 28 movies I call them. We have 28 Weeks Later, 28 Days Later, and then 30 Days of Night, which I thought was a really good vampire movie based on a graphic novel. Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. I'm a history buff, so that movie I liked it. It combined horror and history, so I'll take it. We also have like family horror movies in here. We got the Addams Family movies 1 and 2, the AVP movies, both of them. That's our first double. Alien versus Predator. And then might be my favorite of the Aliens movies, of the whole Alien quadrilogy, which now I think there's 6 of them, is Aliens Part 2. We got the special edition. Eventually I will get all of those, I plan on. Altered States is not a really well-known horror movie, but a very good one. And then Angel Heart, it's one of my favorites. My dad actually introduced me to that movie a long time ago. Really good movie, really good horror movie, Angel Heart, if you ever get a chance to watch that movie. And then we have the first Annabelle. We got the DVD, the Blu-ray, Annabelle Creation. David F. Sandberg directed, who also directed Lights Out. American Psycho, great movie, great book, like just had to be in the collection. American Werewolf in London, the Full Moon edition, great horror comedy, one of the first horror comedies, Jonathan Landis. And then I had to touch up on this, because you know how you always find those quadruple packs, triple packs, double packs of DVDs in the stores, and generally there's one good movie and the rest are just kind of like fillers. But I found this at Walmart like a very long time ago, and it has like 3 great movies together, 3 great horror movies. The original Amityville horror movie, the original Carrie with Sissy Spacek, and then Child's Play Part 1. So I was like, I gotta get this. So I got like 3 birds with 1 stone, so that was great. The DVD collection of my favorite horror show when I was a kid, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Army of Darkness Screwhead Edition, Army of Darkness, the Shout Factory Blu-ray. You gotta get your hands on that. That is just, any horror movie fan, you gotta get Shout Factory's Army of Darkness. The Babadook, extremely well made foreign horror movie, independent horror movie. And then we have, between my wife and I, we have 3 copies of Beetlejuice. And we actually didn't know that until we made this collection. The Belko Experiment, we actually did our first movie review. It was the Belko Experiment. We have the Blair Witch Project, and then I don't have Book of Shadows. I saw it once as a teenager. Like, I didn't really think it was that great. Blair Witch, the latest one in the franchise, directed by Adam Wingard, who also did some of the VHS shorts. Pretty good movie. All the Blades, the Blade trilogy. And we have a double of every single one between my wife and I. Like action horror, which I think is good. Guillermo del Toro's Part 2 is my favorite. The original Universal Bride of Frankenstein on Blu-ray. The original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie with Christy Swanson. Like, it's a classic. And I'm not ashamed, I also own the entire series of the TV show, the Sarah Michelle Gellar TV show. We have the Butterfly Effect, the Cabin in the Woods, which is great. Like, just a great, great tribute to horror movies. Candyman 1 and 2. I don't think I've ever actually seen Candyman Part 3, but I got the first two. Cape Fear, not the original Cape Fear, but Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear with Robert De Niro, and I love Robert De Niro. Just great performance in this movie. Carnival, the series, the entire series. The Carrie remake, which, it was there. Case 39, Children of the Corn on Blu-ray, Children of the Corn on DVD, Children of the Corn 2, 3, and 6, The Return of Isaac. Don't have all the Children of the Corns because they're not that great. They're honestly not that good. Christine, we've done a review in the past of Christine, John Carpenter, Stephen King classic. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, phenomenal horror movie. Phenomenal horror movie. The first Cloverfield that started it all, the 2007 Cloverfield. The Conjuring movies up to now on Blu-ray. Conjuring 1 and 2. Constantine. Not a great horror movie, but I have a guilty pleasure. I'm a fan of Keanu Reeves. So even though he's like not known for being the greatest actor in the world, but two copies of Tim Burton's Corpse Bride between my wife and I. The new remake of The Crazies. The original Universal Creature from the Black Lagoon on Blu-ray. Creepshow, the original anthology. Crimson Peak, another Guillermo del Toro movie, which I actually thought was pretty good. The Crow, the original Crow, the Brandon Lee Crow, DVD, Blu-ray. Cujo, the 80s classic on Blu-ray. Two copies of the new Tim Burton Dark Shadows. Dark Skies, which Dark Skies was a UFO movie which didn't get a lot of like critical praise, but I actually liked it. I thought it was good, so I added it to my collection. The original George Romero, Dawn of the Dead, may he rest in peace. And between my wife and I, we had two copies of the Zack Snyder remake. Daybreakers, Death Becomes Her, which is a pretty good horror comedy from our childhood. Deliver Us from Evil. This is interesting because I actually bought this movie on Blu-ray having never seen it before. And I don't do that often, but I just had a feeling I was going to like that movie, and I did. Starring Eric Bana. The M. Night Shyamalan written movie Devil, which not a lot of people like very much, but I dig it. Like, I don't mind it. I think it's good. M. Night Shyamalan's a good writer, so I added it to my collection. Keanu Reeves is back. We have two copies of Devil's Advocate between my wife and I. Al Pacino as the devil. That's, great movie. Devil's Due on Blu-ray. George Romero's Diary of the Dead, one of his last of his Dead series. Disturbia, which we recently bought, which is kind of like a teen thriller, but it has horror elements to it. Down here we have Fede Alvarez, Don't Breathe, which is a very good horror movie, pretty new. Don't Say a Word, it was there, it's a good thriller. Dracula Untold with Luke Evans. The Francis Ford Coppola Dracula, starring Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing, like just great performance. Gary Oldman as Dracula, like can't go wrong. The original Universal Dracula, the Bela Lugosi Dracula, got that, gotta have that. Dreamcatcher, Donnie Darko, the original Sam Raimi Evil Dead, and the Fede Alvarez remake of Evil Dead, which was very good. Horror movie remakes, or remakes in general, aren't usually that good, but Fede Alvarez, who also directed Don't Breathe, knocked it out of the park with this. The original Evil Dead Sam Raimi Part 2, The Exorcist, one of my favorite movies of all time. The Exorcist, like, I'll give you a good idea of just how impactful this movie is. This Blu-ray of Exorcist has subtitles in about 30 languages. So, just to give you an idea. Like, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, great movie. The Faculty, which is one of my wife and I's favorites, directed by Robert Rodriguez in Austin. Fallen with Denzel Washington. Fido, which is, if you haven't seen Fido, it's kind of a combination of Dawn of the Dead and Pleasantville, which was very unique idea, but it works. All of the Final Destination movies, Fire in the Sky, Firestarter with Drew Barrymore, classic from the 80s. Frailty, directed by Bill Paxton, great movie, very underrated horror movie. The original Universal Frankenstein with Boris Karloff, Freddy vs. Jason, the original Friday the 13th from 1980, the remake of Friday the 13th, and somehow we ended up with Friday the 13th, the final chapter, copy, an individual copy, I'm not sure. And then we have here all of the Paramount Friday the 13th, the collection, part 1 through 8. So, and so moving on, we have Fright Night, the original Chris Sarandon Fright Night on VHS, courtesy of you, Warm Boy. The original Fright Night on DVD. My wife and I met Chris Sarandon at Alamo City Comic Con. That was awesome. The original Fright Night Part 2. I actually had to pay a pretty penny for that on Amazon to get a used DVD. The remake of Fright Night, DVD, Blu-ray, and then we have Frozen, which is not the Disney movie with the snowman and the Ice Queen. Like, just to be clear, this is the horror movie Frozen, where the 3 kids get trapped on the lift at the ski resort. Very overlooked, overrated, with a cameo by Kane Hodder, by the way. From Dusk Till Dawn, Robert Rodriguez, classic vampire movie. From Hell with Johnny Depp. The first Ginger Snaps on Blu-ray. The Joel Edgerton's The Gift, which is more of a thriller, but it's a really, really good movie. Ghostbusters, horror comedy, the Blu-ray collection, the original 2, and the remake, Ghosts of Mars, which was one of the overlooked John Carpenter movies, starring Ice Cube, but still gotta have it in the collection. Get Out, we did a thorough review of that movie already. Jordan Peele's breakout directorial debut, which was an excellent horror movie. Like, just excellent horror movie. The 2 Gremlins movies, Goosebumps, Gothica, starring Halle Berry. Oh, now we get to one of the big ones. We got the original John Carpenter Halloween, the 35th edition on Blu-ray, the original on DVD, and then the entire collection. We got 2, 3, 4, 5, Part 6, which is The Curse of Michael Myers. We have the theatrical and the rare producer's cut. Halloween H2O, where Jamie Lee Curtis came back. The horrendous Halloween Resurrection, but I just had to complete my Halloween collection. The 2 Rob Zombie Halloween movies, an excellent documentary that I got about the Halloween franchise, the Hannibal Lecter 2-pack, it's Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Part 2, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, which is kind of an action horror. I liked it. The Happening, guilty pleasure. Like, it's a horrendously bad movie by M. Night Shyamalan, but it's very entertaining. Have it in my collection. Happy Death Day, one of my wife and I's guilty pleasures we like to watch. we did a review of Happy Death Day. You can check that out on our channel. The original Hellraiser, Clive Barker. Eventually, I'm gonna get a box set of all the Hellraiser movies, but for now, I have the original in the collection. Hide and Seek, Hocus Pocus, DVD and Blu-ray. Eli Roth's first Hostel. I'm not a big fan of gore porn, but I have to admit that I think even Hostel Part 2, the first two Hostel movies, they have a sort of like paranoia element to them that I really like those movies. So I have the first Hostel. Eventually I might get Part 2, but it started to get a little overblown and just kind of all about the gore porn by Part 3, which was very similar to the Saw franchise. Hotel Transylvania 1 and 2, Blu-ray, House of Wax, not the great original with Vincent Price, I'm sorry to say. This is the lousy remake. The original Howling with Dee Wallace. Gore porn galore, as bad as it gets. Human Centipede 1 and 2. The original I Spit on Your Grave, which was a very controversial exploitation film in the 70s. I've never seen the remake or any of the sequels, but we have the original Identity, great movie. As of right now, the complete Insidious movies, Insidious 1, 2, and 3, and we have our first copy of Interview with the Vampire. Excuse me. Our first copy of Interview with the Vampire, because between my wife and I, we discovered that we had quite a few of those. So here's 3 more. Interview with the Vampire. We have 3 DVDs and 1 Blu-ray. We have the original It miniseries, DVD and Blu-ray, plus the new theatrical version on Blu-ray. We have It Follows. I really like that movie. And then we have the new line additions to the Friday the 13th franchise. We have Jason Goes to Hell and the horrendous Jason X. And then there's an excellent documentary hosted by Tom Savini about the Friday the 13th series called His Name Was Jason. Jaws, part 1, 2, and 3, because part 4, Jaws the Revenge, no. Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2 on Blu-ray. I know there's a lot of controversy with those movies because of the director's infamous legal problems, but I do like the first Jeepers Creepers. We have Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which is possibly the greatest B movie ever made. I love that movie. Krampus, the new Krampus, directed by Mike Dougherty. Land of the Dead, George Romero's Land of the Dead. Then we have a Stephen King triple pack. We got The Langoliers, The Stand, and Golden Years, which is mainly like a lot of made-for-TV Stephen King movies, but they're a guilty pleasure of mine, so don't judge me. The Last Exorcism, The Last House on the Left, the original and the remake with Tony Gwynn. The Last Witch Hunter with Vin Diesel, which I actually liked. It didn't get too much critical praise, but I like it. And then we have the 80s classic Legend, where Tim Curry played the Darkness in some of the most captivating makeup I've ever seen in my life. Then we have Let Me In, which is a remake of a foreign film, Let the Right One In. Great movie, very good movie. And then one of my favorites in my collection, we have the Leprechaun triple pack. Leprechaun 1, 2, and 3. Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat, which I think is an amazing thriller, single location thriller, which I actually think could benefit greatly from a remake. I think if they were to remake Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat, it could be a potentially great remake. Lights Out, also directed by David F. Sandberg. Rob Zombie's The Lords of Salem, underrated. Then we have The Lost Boys on DVD and Blu-ray, and The Lost Boys Part 2, The Tribe. And then we have one of the greatest one of the greatest Stephen King movie adaptations ever, Misery. And then we have The Mist, another Stephen King adaptation. And we have, I think, an underrated horror movie, Mirrors, starring Kiefer Sutherland. Monster House, I love that movie. The Monster Squad, love it to death. I'm eventually going to get the Blu-ray. The original Boris Karloff, The Mummy, the original Universal. 2 copies of Near Dark. I'm not sure how that happened. Very underrated vampire movie from the 80s. And then we have Never Sleep Again. Never Sleep Again is a very good documentary about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. If you ever get a chance, watch Never Sleep Again. Very thorough. The Night Flyer, which I can thank Toots for that. He somehow found that. It's a really good HBO adaptation of a Stephen King novel, The Night Flyer. Well, not a novel, short story. The original George Romero, Night of the Living Dead on Blu-ray. Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, gotta have it. The Stephen King miniseries, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And then we get to another big one. We have the original Wes Craven Nightmare on Elm Street. We got DVD, Blu-ray, the horrendous remake of Nightmare on Elm Street on Blu-ray. And then we have all of the remaining sequels, parts 2 through 8. And then we have the number 23 was a Jim Carrey thriller horror movie, which I didn't think was terrible, but it was another one that didn't get a lot of praise from the critics. Oculus, which was directed by Mike Flanagan, which is very good horror movie, contemporary horror movie. And then we have the Omen collection, the complete collection, all the originals, sequels, remake. Then we have Orphan, which is another contemporary horror movie that I think is really good. Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. Paranorman's stop motion, children's horror movie. Like, I love it. And then we have Paranormal Activity, the franchise in its entirety. The marked ones being my favorite. Pet Sematary on VHS, which I have you to thank for, Warm Boy. The original Pet Sematary. And then we have Pet Sematary on DVD and Pet Sematary Part 2. Phoenix Forgotten is a contemporary found footage movie that I think is very underrated. It's about the Phoenix Lights from the 90s. They based a horror movie around the Phoenix Lights from the 90s. Very good movie. If you get a chance, check it out. We have all the Predator movies, which are sort of sci-fi, horror, action, but definitely have horror elements. So we got all 3 Predator movies. Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, which was a very original idea, I thought, and I actually liked the movie, combining classic literature with horror with the zombie element. So I got the Blu-ray and added it to my collection. And the last shelf we got down here, if I can hold my breath for that long, we have the original Poltergeist movies 1 through 3, The Possession, which is a contemporary horror movie about possession, starring Negan, by the way, starring Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who's now infamous for his Walking Dead fame. Some movie called Pulse that I've never seen before. It somehow ended up in our collection. It's a horror movie that I've never seen before. So if anyone out there has seen it, you can tell me about it. All the Purge movies, I know that those are kind of, there's half people that like them, half that don't. But I like the Purge movies, so we have all 3 of them. All the Puppet Master movies, 1 through 6. The original Alfred Hitchcock Psycho, which is just a horror movie staple. A must-own for any horror fan. The Queen of the Damned. Uh, you know, it's based on an Anne Rice novel. That's about the best thing about it. The two Ouija movies, Ouija 1, which was, it's alright, you know. And then Ouija 2, Origin of Evil, which is also directed by Mike Flanagan, which he completely redeemed the franchise because it's a great movie. We have Resident Evil 1 and 2. Eventually we might add to that. We have The Ring 1 and 2. We have Saw Part 3. I used to have the first two Saw movies, and then I lent them out, never saw them again. And that's when I stopped lending out movies. I actually liked the first two Saw movies, but the Saw franchise started to like lose my interest after that. So then we have the Scream franchise in its entirety, Scream 1 through 4, which were all directed by Wes Craven. Secret Window, another Stephen King adaptation starring Johnny Depp, which I think is really good. And then we have my favorite movie of all time, not just horror, any genre, you ask me, David Fincher's Seven. Love the movie. I will always love the movie. The greatest serial killer movie ever written, ever filmed, acted, whatever. We have the DVD, we have the collector's edition DVD of Seven, and we have the Blu-ray of Seven. And then we have Shaun of the Dead on DVD and Blu-ray, which is just a great horror comedy classic from Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost. Just, I have nothing bad to say about Shaun of the Dead. If you haven't seen it, stop watching our video right now and go watch it. We have Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, classic. Shutter Island, which was directed by Martin Scorsese. I believe his first horror movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a great horror movie. We have Signs by M. Night Shyamalan, which has comedy elements, has drama elements, but there are some clear horror elements in that movie. Silent Hill, one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen, but clearly a horror movie, and I like it. Stephen King's Silver Bullet, the Sinister movies 1 and 2. I don't know. I'm not sure if they're gonna continue with that franchise, but I like those movies. James DeMonaco, who also wrote and directed the Purge movies, he also wrote and directed the first Sinister movie. So we'll see if they continue with that. The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan classic, great drama, horror, thriller, just A+ movie. Like, Shout Factory's Blu-ray release of Sleepaway Camp. You must see this movie. Like, it's a exploitation 80s movie, like campy 80s, just with a twist ending that is amazing. Just, that's all I can say. We have Tim Burton's version of Sleepy Hollow, M. Night Shyamalan's Split, which I really hope that they continue in that franchise. Stephen King's Storm of the Century, the original Strangers. We did a thorough review of that movie on our channel if you want to check that out. Haven't seen part 2 yet, but I haven't heard very many good things about it. Soul Survivors, Spawn. Sorry. Survival of the Dead, which was George Romero's final film in his Dead franchise. May he rest in peace. Still a good one. Tim Burton's Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber on Fleet Street. Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Great movie, starring Johnny Depp. Tales from the Hood, the Shout Factory Blu-ray. Great horror anthology. We did a very thorough review of that one. That's another one from Shout Factory. Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Knight, the Shout Factory Blu-ray. Those two you need to get your hands on if you're a horror movie fan. You need to look up Shout Factory online. You need to check out their horror movies. They make excellent horror Blu-rays. Like, I'll give them as much free publicity as they want me to. Then we have the DVD double pack of Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, and Bordello of Blood, and seasons 1 and 2 of Tales from the Crypt, the show. And I recently saw the entire series at Walmart, the box set. I was thinking about getting that. And we have here we have the original Toby Hooper Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the metal case. It's the DVD, but eventually I'm probably gonna get all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacres on Blu-ray. But this is the original classic starring Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface. So we have that. And then we have the 2 Texas Chainsaw remakes from the 2000s. Texas Chainsaw 3D. I saw it at Walmart once for like $4. 13 Ghosts, which I think is actually a very underrated horror movie. It's a good movie. Teeth, which is an independent horror movie that's really freaky. I won't go into any details, especially on why the movie's called Teeth, but it's good. But just, you know, it might make you afraid to do certain things after watching it. John Carpenter's remake of The Thing, which is a great 80s horror movie. The Tremors pack, which is the first 4. I bought that years ago, and now I heard that there's actually part 5, but that's the Tremors pack. Mike Dougherty's Trick or Treat, which is a awesome horror anthology. Kevin Smith's movie Tusk, which that is the freakiest movie. Like, just, it's kind of a gore porn movie, which I'm not a big fan of, but it's all over the place, and just what happens to a certain character in that movie is just terrifying. So, we have all the Twilight movies, the entire Twilight franchise in its entirety. We have the Twilight Zone, the movie, the anthology from the 80s. Twilight Zone, the TV series, the entire TV series. M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, great movie. John Carpenter's Vampires. Wes Craven's Vampire in Brooklyn, which I actually think is a very underrated horror movie, horror comedy, somewhat. M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, and M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit, which, you know, they're more drama, but they have horror elements, so I put them in my horror collection. And then, to cap things off, we have the Underworld franchise, which I haven't seen Blood Wars yet. I haven't seen the 5th one, but I have the original through part 4, and then we have a double there of part 2. Unfriended, which I actually think, I went into that movie thinking that it wasn't going to be very good, and it really surprised me. I think I would recommend Unfriended. Like, I think it's a really good movie. Season 1 of The Walking Dead on Blu-ray. Warm Bodies, which I thought was a very innovative movie. The Witch, which is like the breakout movie of like the past 2-3 years. If you get a chance, watch The Witch. It felt like a Stanley Kubrick movie. It felt like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Like, just, it's a great horror movie. Like, The Witches of Eastwick, directed by George Miller, who directed the Mad Max movies, which I didn't know that until I researched. The Wolf movie from the 90s with Jack Nicholson, Michelle Pfeiffer. I've liked that movie since I was a kid. The original Universal Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman, the remake of the Wolfman, Benicio del Toro. The First Wrong Turn, which I really liked the first Wrong Turn. That movie kind of has like 10 sequels by now, I'm not sure, but I never saw any of the sequels. They never got my attention, but the original Wrong Turn is a very good horror movie. And finally, we have Zombieland on DVD and Blu-ray. And as of right now, whew, that is the entire horror movie collection for, but it's ever growing. Like it's just we're constantly adding to it. But so, if you have any thoughts, if you have any recommendations, if you have any thoughts on the movies we talked about, just let us know. I'm kind of out of breath right now. So, this is Damien from the Dudes of Horror. And later on, we're going to add to this video, we're going to be filming our memorabilia, our horror memorabilia, and maybe some movies that we might have missed. But, because I'm sure there's still some out there. But yeah, that's the horror collection. So, this is Damien tuning out.